Good afternoon.
Hello. Hope I'm not too late.
Good afternoon, guests. Good afternoon to all our viewers. We are here today. We are here today to have a conversation about the conviction of Makomborero Haruzivishe, a pro-democracy activist who was convicted on the 31st of March. So joining us for this conversation is Namatai Kwekweza, a pro-democracy and human rights activist. Comrade Peter Mtasa, the president of the ZCTU. Comrade Munyaradzi Bisai from the International Socialist Organization. Comrade Bisai is also a lawyer. And we also have Wombera Imende, the deputy spokesperson of the NDC Alliance Youth Assembly. So welcome to our guest. And Gilbert Mutubuki, former Senate president, will be joining this conversation at another stage.
Hello. No, I'm fine.
Okay, we seem to have lost our host there, but the conversation has to continue. And this is Zimbabwe Daily. We're coming to you live on the platform. And I'll just ask all our guests to mute their microphones so that we'll be able to have this conversation. Karen, you are our host on this platform. You may kindly proceed. If there's any other device that is switched on, we may need to silence it because there's a little bit of feedback. Thank you, Zimbabwe, for joining us. We're coming to you live on our Zim Daily platform. May you please join us and bring in your contributions. We love to hear from you, your own understanding of what is happening in our judiciary. So the subject is conviction of Makomborero Haruzivishe, an isolated case or a sign of judiciary capture. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Yvonne. So to kickstart this conversation, I'm going to ask Namatai Kwekweza. Namatai, if you can give us a bit of context of what exactly is happening with Makomborero, what charges have been leveled against him, what has led us to this point? Namatai, please go ahead.
Thanks very much to you, Karen, and to everyone who is tuning in. A very good afternoon. It's very, very saddening. I think it's been a very sad past week for Zimbabwe, in particular Makomborero Haruzivishe, because of the weaponization of the judiciary system against him upon the premise of flimsy charges that are being laid up against him for his participation in advancing democracy here in Zimbabwe and also standing up to defend human rights. And what is particularly unfortunate about all of this is also the propaganda around his arrest that is being perpetuated by those who have the most benefit from peddling certain narratives against Makomborero Haruzivishe. And I think that this is a great platform for us to be in a position where we set the record straight and people actually know what is fact and what is fiction. So to start with, there has been peddling around that Makomborero Haruzivishe has been convicted for kidnapping or for locking people up at Impala. I think the first and most important thing that we have to do as we begin this discussion is to clear this out and say that Makomborero Haruzivishe was not convicted for kidnapping. He was not convicted for locking anyone up, and that is a lie. That is something that is being peddled by those who want to create the narrative and the perception that persons like Makomborero Haruzivishe are dangerous and they are criminals, of which that is very much untrue. That having been said and cleared out, I would like to now quickly dive into stating the facts, as of what is written down on Makomborero Haruzivishe's charge sheet. And this charge sheet is something that any progressive and any interested in Wheeling Zimbabwean can easily access online for them to get the facts of the arrest and the conviction of Makomborero Haruzivishe. So the charge sheet reads, in the matter between the state versus Makomborero Haruzivishe, who is aged 28, it states that Makomborero Haruzivishe was arrested by his officers. And the circumstances are that on the 5th day of February 2020, at around 10:30 in the morning, and at corner First Street and Nelson Mandela, the complainant was on patrol, that is the arresting officer, was on patrol together with his colleagues on that particular patrol. And then while this police in uniform were dealing with some vendors sprouting in the CBD, what eventually happened was that the accused got there and started mobilizing members of the public by whistling, using a whistle code, trying to, according to these individuals, convince the members of the public to revolt against the police. And he went on to throw stones towards the police and their vehicle. So this is what is being said to have been what happened. So that being the case, the police then stated that the complainant tried to, a complainant is in this case the police, tried to effect an arrest, but the accused resisted him as, according to the police, he became violent, vicious, shouting on top of his voice, saying in Shona, "Munoda kuti what is a check?" Meaning you want to arrest us to fix us. The accused person was later on overpowered by the police officers and was arrested and taken to Harare Central. The complainant, who is in this case a police person, sustained no visible injuries. The accused person unlawfully, according to what the police has stated. So therefore, what we need to understand is that Makomborero is charged with crime of one count of incitement to commit public violence as defined in section 187A 187.1 subsection A at the reading of the section 36 of the Criminal Code. And that on the 5th of February, at the corner of First and Nelson Mandela Street, Makomborero in any manner was trying to entice the public to revolt against the police and also to act violently. So basically, this is what has been stated on the and these are the charges that are being laid against Makomborero, and these are the circumstances to which Makomborero was arrested and also has been convicted. And as the public can see, this has absolutely nothing to do with any kind of kidnapping. It has absolutely nothing to do with any kind of locking anyone up. So that narrative in itself is littered with propaganda, and it's something that we have to address as we move forward. The final thing that I would like to highlight regards to this particular charge sheet is that the arresting officer is, presenting all of this information against Makomborero Haruzivishe. And he indicates that Makomborero was throwing stones at them, and yet this was in the CBD. Where could Makomborero have gotten stones? There are certain issues like where those stones are presented in court. When Makomborero was being tried before he was convicted. So it's very, very unfortunate that these are the charges that are being laid of inciting public violence, of which it's just a police officer who is saying that this happened, but there is no actual tangible evidence to prove that it happened. And it's very, very unfortunate that upon this premise, with very, very flimsy evidence, Makomborero has actually been convicted. Just to conclude my presentation, I think that as Zimbabweans, and particularly as young people across the civil society spectrum, across the political divide, as young people in churches, as young people who non-affiliate, as young people in any industry, business, art, etc., we must be in a position where we voice out this injustice because it is a recession to our democracy. And if we are now witnessing the conviction of activists upon flimsy charges, the weaponization of the judiciary system to prosecute and also to convict activists for standing up for their rights, for speaking truth to power, we can be rest assured that Makomborero's conviction would definitely be the first of many. So we must understand this as something bigger than just the conviction of a fellow comrade, who in this case is Makomborero Haruzivishe, but we must also see it as an attack on the democratic movement, in particular, everybody who is participating to advance democracy in Zimbabwe, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of where they come from and who they are. We have to be in a position where we understand and see things for exactly what they are, which is the state beginning to use convictions, not just arrest, but also convictions are now being weaponized against activists. So that having been said, it's very, very important for us to be in a position where we stand together as young people and also as the broader movement of people advancing democracy and organizations advancing democracy. And we organize to demand the release of Makomborero Haruzivishe as well as for justice to be served. And we also participate in dismantling rogue and dangerous narratives against our fellow comrades, Makomborero Haruzivishe, such narratives that try to depict him as a criminal, and such narratives that are stating that he was arrested for abduction, he was arrested for locking people up, and that he was arrested for kidnapping, which in this case is actually not true. That having been said, I hand over time to you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Namatai. Thank you for reading us the charge sheet. And I think now everyone who's listening in actually knows why Makomborero was convicted.
And network comes in to disturb the flow of that conversation. Thank you so much, Namatai, for giving us the charge sheet. Karen, can you hear us?
My apologies for that interruption.
Okay.
So moving on, I would like to call Comrade Munyaradzi Gwisai. Could you please come in and give us your legal opinion? We would like to hear from you as a lawyer. What's your opinion on this, Comrade? Comrade Gwisai?
Good afternoon, viewers and comrades. Thank you, comrades, for organizing this solidarity meeting with Comrade Marco, which I think, as the previous speaker has said, is a very important milestone in the struggle for democracy. Suffice to say, of course, there is a conviction, so the court has found him guilty, and I think the sentence is going to be handed down tomorrow, Tuesday. So to that extent, obviously, from a legal perspective, there are matters that can be discussed and there are others that cannot be discussed, which are sub judice. In other words, they can only be discussed after the court has handed down its judgment in terms of sentence. But from the conviction, it's indeed a worrying trend. The effects of the case give rise to a real fear of a hardening of authoritarianism in Zimbabwe, for those who had illusions in the regime that came into power after the November 2017 coup and its false promises of an opening up for reforms and democracy. This is really an example that, if anything, what we now have is growing authoritarianism involving the various structures of the state. So the two crimes that Mako has been convicted of, the one of incitement of public violence and resisting arrest. These are seen as crimes against public order in terms of the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act. So that is the Act statute which governs this area, and more particularly Chapter 4 thereof, dealing with crimes against against public order. Now you will note that for both crimes, if one is convicted, so for engagement in conduct that may result in disturbance or breach of peace, security, or order of the public, or incitement thereof. And then secondly, also the crime of resisting arrest by a person in authority, including a police officer, under Section 176. Now, for both of these crimes, the possible sentences are 10 years. Well, it's firstly a fine up to level 12, or 10 years imprisonment, or both. And that applies to both types of crimes. In other words, it would mean that if sentence is done, the possibility therefore is one for imprisonment for a total of up to 20 years, or level 12 fines, or both. So this is quite serious and very severe. What is surprising, though, is that in this case there was no occurrence of harm, damage to police officers, to property, and all there is really is the purported whistling designed to mobilize other persons, namely vendors, to commit violence. So the court has, in its wisdom, has decided that conviction is appropriate. But we must remember that under the Constitution, citizens have a right to demonstrate under Section 59 of the Constitution, as long as what they're doing is peaceful. And from the circumstances of this case, there's really nothing that shows that the gathering, if any, was going to be none other than a peaceful gathering. To that extent, the criminal law code should really be consistent with the Constitution, including freedom of expression. So the conviction has been done. We wait for the sentence, but I have grave doubts about the appropriateness of the conviction in view of the higher freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution, that is the freedom to demonstrate, the freedom to assemble, as well as the freedom of expression. Previous cases, in fact, 10 years from now, 10 years ago, on 19 February, we ourselves from the International Socialist Organization, along with activists from ZINASU, trade unionists, were also arrested on a similar charge. In fact, initially it was treason, then eventually downgraded to incitement to commit public violence. This is when we were watching a video of the revolution that was ongoing in Egypt, which had led to the removal, ouster, massive demonstrations by youth and workers, which led to the removal of the Egyptian dictator, Hosni Mubarak, a 30-year dictator, on the 10th of February. So we were, 46 of us, we were arrested, detained, and charged with, treason, and then a similar charge that Mako eventually is now facing. We were convicted, but on appeal, this same matter was in fact thrown out, it was reversed. And indeed, the prosecutor, one of the senior prosecutors there, made an admission that in a democratic society, that kind of conduct, meeting, discussing the events in Egypt, and even discussing their potential relevance to Zimbabwe, was not conduct that should be criminalized in a democratic society. And the conviction was therefore set aside. We had been convicted, and I think we were sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. The 6 of us, myself, Tafazwa Choto, Hopwe Gumbo, Welcome Zimuto, and Chakuma, Tatenda Mombiarara, the 6 of us, who eventually remained with this. So we were sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. We were also given community service, I think about 300 hours of community service, and a $500 fine. They're all combined, but we did not get a custodial sentence. So the precedents here really, and this was a much more serious thing than what is involved here. So I'm really surprised that the magistrate has taken the line of conviction in this matter. Standing precedent, as I've said in the State versus Gwisai matter, Gwisai and others versus State, is clear that this kind of conduct should not really be conduct that should be criminalized. But again, as it was in 2011, 2012, this just shows you the nature of the state today, that the state, including its judicial organs, are clearly afraid of what is happening in the country. The level of attack on workers, on our youth, on vendors, the levels of poverty that people have endured in the last year, in which the state has used COVID to massively suppress the rights to any livelihood of youth, of vendors, the attack on workers, the attack on democracy, as you've seen up to now. We've had recall of MPs and councillors from the opposition, but by-elections up to now have not been held under the guise. So all this shows you that we have a state that is in fact fragile, a state that is afraid and fearful of its own people, in particular our youth, in particular the working class. And what this conviction is designed to do, it is designed to send fear into our youth, into the working class. It is designed to send fear into the bourgeois opposition, not to stand up and fight against the closure of democratic space, not to stand up and fight against the theft of workers' salaries that has happened, not to stand up against the massive immiserization, impoverization of our people. The system that our rulers preside over, the system of capitalism, in particular in its sphere of neoliberalism and austerity, cannot continue like this. It is likely to end up meeting resistance. So for me, my reading of the situation is that the trivial circumstances in which this conviction has been done did not merit the conviction in view of judicial precedent, and can only demonstrate that the state seeks to send a message and to try and thwart possible resistance from the citizens against growing authoritarianism in our country. But that has never worked in history. Smith did the same kind of laws under the Law and Order Maintenance Act. They did not stop the young people of this country taking up resistance against the colonial states. It did not save Mubarak and so forth. It did not save the apartheid regime in South Africa. So it must not stop and deter and make our youth and our working class afraid. That is part and parcel of the struggle against authoritarianism. But solidarity is very important in fighting. When we were convicted ourselves, on the day of sentencing, hundreds of youth, socialists, workers, and so forth were at court. And this helped send a message to the regime that people were not afraid and they were not going to fight back. And that is, in many ways, help contribute to us not getting a jail sentence or a custodial sentence. So I would say, let the struggle continue, let this solidarity continue, and we must not be deterred. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Bukai. I think this leaves us, with a better appreciation of the laws that are being used to convict Makomborero and also what this means, the legal implications of this. So moving on, I'd like to move on to Comrade Peter Mutasa. Comrade Mutasa, what are the implications for this conviction? What are the implications for citizens? What is the implications for the citizens of Zimbabwe?
Right. Thank you very much. And I think this is a very important matter. And I associate myself fully with what Comrade Bisai has just spoken about, and also what Comrade Namatai has stated. The implications are too huge to ignore. They are too big to ignore. Firstly, we need to appreciate as a nation that we are now under a military regime, a junta, a military rule. Anything that resembles democracy is a facade that is used to hoodwink the international community that Zimbabwe is still a constitutional democracy, and also to placate and to also hoodwink citizens that are not critical in terms of analyzing political, social, and economic developments of the country into believing that we are still a constitutional democracy. This is why at some point we hear people raising funny arguments around the arrest and conviction of Mako. So the major point to note is that under a military rule, all the constitutional rights are suspended. You cannot speak about the right to freedom of speech because the military works on orders. You can't speak about the right to freedom of assembly or association. They don't want anything that challenges their power. You also cannot speak about independent institutions. So you cannot trust or get comfort from the police, because the police will also be working on orders. You also cannot even rely on the parliament, that the parliament will come in and veto some of the executive decisions, because the parliament itself is also whipped into submission. You can't rely on the judiciary, that the judiciary will be independent and bring about justice. The judiciary under a military rule will play according to the military rule games. So if they are told to incarcerate, they will incarcerate, and they'll always find a reason. They'll also always find justification. So this is one important aspect that as Zimbabweans, whether you're in the trade unions, whether you are in opposition, whether you are in the churches, or whether you are in other progressive movements, we need to appreciate that the game has to change. We are under a military rule, and it has got different approach. Under Mugabe, we were arrested as trade unionists, but they will not convict you. They will just arrest you so that you don't have your freedom and your liberty. They will arrest you so that you don't have your ability to organize. They will arrest you to threaten other workers so that they don't follow you. But we saw what happened with Sheila Chisirimuno when she was arrested just for holding a placard and sentenced to 16 months. So this is not affecting a particular section of the community. This is affecting all of us. No one is spared. For as long as you want to fight for justice, social justice, for as long as you want to fight for democracy, for as long as you want to fight for constitutionalism, for as long as you want to fight against corruption, against poor governance, against anything that is inimical to the interests of citizens, you are a target. So this is one fundamental aspect of it. The second aspect is that the military government is failing. It is failing on all facets. But one of the major areas that it is failing is economic and social sphere. There is an economic and social implosion that we are facing. The salaries of citizens, of workers, have been eroded seriously. Many workers are barely earning enough to feed their families. You can see with the minimum wage of 2,549, which is just $25, it cannot even buy beyond 25 loaves of bread for working for the whole month. Domestic workers are earning $9, which is just equivalent to 9 loaves of bread. You can see how people are no longer able to pay for school fees. You need 40,000 to pay for university for one semester when the parent is earning 13 or 11,000 as a teacher. You need to pay 20,000 for most schools in the city when people are earning 5,000, 2,500 as the minimum wage. So the regime is aware that there is no equilibrium. The situation cannot be maintained any longer. And they know that the power is with the people. So they are doing this, which is a form of lawfare. They are not going, they've realized what happened when they engaged in brazen abductions and torture. There was a public outcry and international outcry. So they want to maintain, they are conscious that they cannot come out and be clearly a dictatorship, a military regime that is seen by all, that is felt by all, that is seen by all local and international. So they are trying to maintain a semblance of a democratic, a constitutional democracy. But the citizens are supposed to feel that they are under military rule, so that they are suppressed, they don't raise their voices. So we are now witnessing what is generally called lawfare, where they pretend they are following due process of law. You are arrested by the police, you are tried in a public court, but the whole system is captured and it works according to the whims of those who are in power. So we are going to witness this happening to all of us. We have seen it happening to journalists, Opo Echingono and others. We've seen it happening to opposition political leaders, Mahere, Sikala, and others. We've seen it happening to trade unionists. We've seen it happening to ordinary citizens, the vendors that Marco was defending. So we are going to witness this happening to the whole spectrum of the citizens. And this is why this matter is important, because no one is spared. So what we need to appreciate is that as citizens, we need to learn from the past. I think there is a pastor in German who once wrote this quotation, which is quite very important for us now. Nimola, he said, first they came for the socialist and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. I think what we need to realize, all of us now, is that we are not spared. None of us is spared. They are going to incarcerate all of us if we don't stand up and speak up and demand our rights. And we cannot wait for any other time, despite this time when they have convicted Marco. We did not speak forcefully when they convicted Sheila, but I'm glad that we spoke and they gave a bail. But we need to speak united. We need to stand up and fight for Mako so that they don't take the next person who is probably you or me, Gwisai or Namatai or Mtasa or any one of us who is following and listening to this conversation. You are not spared. So this is where we are. The only way to deal with a military regime is to engage in non-violent resistance. And Comrade Gwisai spoke about how they failed during colonial rule, and they are losing the colonial systems. They are losing the colonial judiciary in Zimbabwe. They are losing the colonial rules that have just been rechristened and given new names. They are using all the tactics that they inherited from the colonial rule. So we need to also challenge it the same way we challenged apartheid. They failed with apartheid. So the only way is to engage in non-violent resistance. We cannot afford to use violence. If you use violence, you have gotten into their game and you give them excuse to brutalize citizens and to use the full armor of the state. So we need to continue speaking up. We need to continue to mobilize. If the jails are going to be filled up, let them be filled up by trade unionists, let them be filled up by students, activists, let them be filled up by opposition leaders and activists, let them be filled up by fighters for social justice, the vendors that Mako was defending. Let them be filled up by the vendors and the working class. So we can only achieve that if we are persistent and consistent. And finally, out together through solidarity. So this is what is happening. It has nothing to do with Mako as an individual. Like Mandela said and was quoted, I was made by the law a criminal, not because of what I had done, but because of what I stood for, because of what I thought, because of my conscience. So it is not about Mako. It is about what Mako stands for, and it is about what the common man in this country is fighting for. And they are just using lawfare to deceive the international community that they are not a dictatorship, that they are not a military junta, and that they are following due process of law. But this is meant to make us feel that we are under a military state. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for so much, President Mutasa. I think, both you and Comrade Gwisai paint quite a grave picture. So I would like at this point to ask Omberai Nende from the MDC Alliance. You are a young person, you are a youth activist. What do you see as the implication on young people? As a young person, what's your response to this? Please check your mic, Ombe.
Sorry about that. I think first and foremost, we must understand that what we have here is a new deception, not a new dispensation. So all the things that they've promised in terms of opening up of the democratic space, they were all lies, and it has been evident in the manner in which they are conducting themselves against anyone who's perceived to be speaking anything meaningful against the government, anyone who's seeking to earn a living through vending, anyone who is working, even the teachers, the civil servants, everyone. If you dare to speak against poor remuneration or against the conditions of work in your respective area, you're going to find yourself being persecuted. And this is a clear institutionalized system of hegemonial coercion, whereby they are prosecuting people and using that prosecution as a way of persecution. I think my fellow colleagues, comrades here, Comrade Gwisai and Comrade Peter Mtasa, have spoken about the issues to say that these issues, they've been happening. We have quite a number of people that have succumbed to this system, that have been convicted under the regime of Emerson Mnangagwa. And the implications thereof of this decision by the courts to convict Makomborero Haruzivishe speak to the fact that they want, number one, they want to intimidate the activists, whether you are a human rights activist, you're a political activist, you're an environmental activist. The moment you speak against AMA as an environmental activist, you're going to get yourself arrested. So they want to silence everyone in Zimbabwe. So the next person you have a woman who's raped, and they speak against the rape, they're going to be arrested for that. I think we have seen anyone who dares to hold a placard in Zimbabwe, they've been criminalized, they've been charged, and they've been arraigned before the courts. And this is something that is not an isolated case. You have the police themselves, the manner in which you are going to be arrested will show you the amount of brutality that has been okayed by people who are sitting in the echelons of power in the executive. The police are allowed to brutalize people. And when you are taken to the court, you will find that the manner in which you are treated, if you are deemed to opposition, is different from the manner someone else who's aligned to the president, someone who's aligned to the executive in ZANU-PF is treated. I think we have clear cases where Obadiah was not even charged or even sent to prison for things that we all know that he was alleged that he stole COVID funds. But the person who had the audacity to expose such was arraigned before the courts for having exposed such corruption. So you have the corrupt being protected by the people that are actually being involved in exposing. The whistleblowers are the ones that are being arrested for exposing such things. And moving forward, you find that the implications thereof are a clear indication of things that have already been said, even by the judges themselves. If you go to 2020 in October, there was a letter which was written to the president by the judges themselves. They're expressing their concern about the manner in which they are being dealt with in terms of executing their duties. They are being intimidated, and there is a lot of judicial capture. So you find Marco's case cannot be in isolation, but Marco's case is a clear indication of the manifestation of the judicial capture that we are facing. In that very same letter, you find that it's coming from the judges themselves, and it did not been for the Jurist Forum and the African judges. Right now, all the judgments that will be coming from the judges and the magistrates will be going through Malabar's office. That you cannot handle a judgment before Malabar sees it, before a superior views and edits your judgment to see, is it fit for the person that you are overseeing on their case. So you now find a situation whereby the judiciary has been captured to the extent that the judges are no longer independently executing their duties. And the implications are very clear. If you are deemed to be opposition, you are highly likely, actually the chances are 0.9 to 1 that the probability of you getting a conviction against your case will be very high. And what they've done now is, as of now, as we speak right now, if you look at the Youth Assembly of the MDC Alliance where I come from, you will find that everyone, almost everyone, has got a case in the courts. And the cases speak to the very same manner and speak to the very same case, to the same charges that Makomborero Haruzivishe is facing. So you find today is Makomborero, and on the 16th I'm going to court, it's Womberaishe. Then after that you have Cecilia, you have Netsai, you have Bestole, you have Denford Ngaziwore, you have all the youth activists, you have Ostala Sisiba. So you find it's now a web where they are connecting everyone who is linked to the young people and who speaks against the rotten nature in which the economy has gone. You have social economic crisis in Zimbabwe, and that social and economic crisis can only be addressed by the voicing of the young people. We have ourselves formulated what we call the 1 million campaign, which is 1 million voices being projected against tyranny, against the social ills, against the economic decadence, against unemployment, against the systems in terms of health delivery, against the commodification of education, against the poor remuneration that is being faced by citizens, against the brutality that is happening on citizens, against the lack of security of individuals and persons, against the corruption, against the lack of constitutionalism, against the lack of rule of law in Zimbabwe. So as those voices come out to say we want to punctuate and say this is wrong, you will find that people will be arrested, people will face these convictions. And if you read what was said by my sister Namatai with regards to the case against Mako, you see there are a lot of things that are not in place. The case itself, the testimonies themselves, they are off tangential to the merits that can warrant someone to being convicted. But regardless of that, the magistrate had the audacity to even go that extent and say Makomborero is guilty and thereby is convicted of such an issue. And the nucleus of this issue is around the convergence of citizens. So you have Makomborero, who is a human rights activist, being convicted on issue where he is being purported to have converged with the vendors. That is the convergence, the citizen convergence towards change that is now mooting. The manifestation of those things. As they now try to convict you, you realize that there is already a drive towards the citizen convergence to change. And the young people cannot be intimidated by these convictions. The young people shall not be intimidated. Young people shall stand in solidarity, one of the three pillars of social democracy, as we move towards liberating Zimbabwe from the jaws of this tyrant. I'll give it back to you, my sister.
Thank you so much, Wombe. Thank you so much for that message and for really clearing what the position of young people is, especially, coming from where you're coming from. And so at this point, I would really like to thank the guests for their inputs, for the presentations that really, I think for every Zimbabwean who was listening, you understand that there is that message that, no one is safe if the situation is like this. And there were even the comments that came from the audience were also in line with that. So to conclude this discussion, I'd like to ask our presenters to just in 1 minute, maybe give us their parting shots. I'll start with you, Namatai, to conclude this conversation. What do you have to say in 1 minute, please, Namatai? Oh, okay. I think I'll start with you, President Mutasa. Your parting shots for this.
There's only one thing we need to do. We need to organize ourselves. Let's come together. Let's clarify our agenda and let us mobilize around it. I am pushing for a united front. Everyone is not safe. Everyone is affected. We need to hear all voices. So we need to do so, but
the audio, Mr. President, is not very clear.
Ideological basing that we are fighting for freedom, we are fighting against repression, but we are also fighting for social justice. We are fighting against neoliberalism, which is what Mako was doing. And we need to do so through solidarity. So we need to hear the workers' voices, we need to hear the students' voices, we need to hear all voices, churches. And the beginning, the first point is to stand in solidarity with Mako this Tuesday. He must be sentenced in our presence. So I invite and I encourage all people to come and be present and stand with Mako when the magistrate stands out the sentence. Thank you.
I'm sorry for the audio that we lost for a minute there. I think it was just a matter of erratic internet connection. But thank you so much for your parting shots, President Mutasa. And I think that message is very clear to all the citizens who are listening right now. Comrade Gwisai, your parting shots, please.
Thank you, comrades, for a powerful discussion from my fellow panelists. It is important that we have started this solidarity. It must not end here on social media, on WhatsApp. we have to organize and mobilize on the ground. And in mobilizing and organizing on the ground, we must be aware that we are facing a double-edged sword of war from both the dictatorship of the current regime, Mnangagwa government, as well as the system that it protects and runs on. That is a system of capitalism and neoliberalism. It is that system which is failing, which has led to huge losses of work and jobs for unemployment for ordinary people, attacks on vendors, attack on tobacco farmers, peasants, artisanal miners, and so forth. So we must not forget the context and the basis from which these attacks are coming from. This is a war by the rich against workers, against poor, against peasants. This is what Zimbabwe is open for business means. And what it therefore means is that and dealing with such a regime, pious appeals, dialogue, and so forth are not going to work. If we are going to continue hoping and praying and believing that dialogue and appeasement with this regime will achieve results, then we are going to see hundreds, if not thousands, of our young people, workers, Democrats, being facing what has happened with Mako. This is just the beginning of a process that shows a hardening regime. And the only way that we can move forward is therefore to unite and be prepared to use our power as workers, our power as youth, to fight back. And in this fight back, it is the working class, organized labor, working hand in hand with the youth, that must be at the forefront. Because it is workers, it is the poor, it is the youth who are receiving the biggest attacks and whom the regime will seek to crush the most. So it is imperative that we now move forward in a united front of resistance, led by the working class, involving our youth, involving all those who want to fight for democracy, fighting to ensure both the opening up of democratic space against our current dictatorship, but also fighting against the system of neoliberalism, austerity, and capitalism, which is causing poverty, not only in this country, but across our region and across the world. United in that fight back, there is no power in this country, on this earth, that can take a united working class in resistance. So let Mako's conviction, let it be a wake-up call for the democratic movement, for the working class, for our youth, to guide our chariots for battle. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Comrade Bisai, for those powerful parting shots. Wombe, I'll leave the floor to you in 1 minute. Could you please give us our parting shot, your parting shots?
Okay, thank you very much. I think, let me perhaps use the vernacular on this one to say that Emmerson Mnangagwa is coming from the system of ZANU-PF. So, chishona chedu chinoti, hakuna bura rinotasanukira mupfimbi, iro rabva mudutu rakaminama. Implications to say, the system that has brought Emmerson Mnangagwa remains the same. And actually, it's now even hardening. So in order for us to confront the regime of Emmerson Mnangagwa, we need to have a convergence of purpose towards change. We need to have everyone putting their hands on the deck and we push together. Not to say that you expect Wombe alone to be leading from the front. We want everyone, the churches, the students, the workers, the vendors, everyone must come on board. The commercial sex workers, everyone, because what we are speaking of here is an issue of victimization of citizens by a regime, and it does that indiscriminately. So under the banner of solidarity, freedom, and justice, as social democrats, I urge every young person, I urge everyone, or even the aged, let's all converge together under a unit of purpose so that we confront the regime by all means necessary. So tomorrow, as they hand over their judgment, we will also be at the courts in solidarity with Comrade Makomborero Haruzivishe, making sure that we set our message very clear to the regime, that we are not afraid of the regime, and we are even ready to face the regime and voice out against the tyranny and this institutionalized system of persecution by prosecution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Comrade Wombe. I think that was very clear and articulate. The position for the youths that you lead is also very clear there. So I'm just going to take this time to thank our guests. Thank you so much to Namatai Kwekweza for taking time to join this conversation. Thank you to President Peter Mtasa of the ZCTU. Thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you, Comrade Gisai. Thank you for opening our minds to the legal situation in this country. And thank you very much, Womberai Naishe, for coming in to give the youth perspective. This has been a very powerful and important conversation, and I would really like to thank our viewers as well, and also for all those comments. A lot of comments were posted in solidarity with Mako, and thank you so much, Zimbabwe, for this. And Yvonne, thank you for providing the platform. It's been a good conversation, and I hand it back to you, Yvonne. Thank you.
Them loot, oh them loot Zimbabwe dry. Them loot, oh how the people die. Them loot, no medication in hospitals. Them loot, schools have no books. Them loot. The ghetto youth have no jobs. Them loot. Lord of mercy. Them loot. Oh, them loot Zimbabwe dry. Lord of mercy. Jah have mercy. Them loot. Oh, while the people die, while the people cry.